Hi. So, I've been thinking about love a lot lately, and not the kind of dramatic love that you see on TV or on social media, but actually the grounded experience of love, the almost boring simplicity of love, and what experiencing love um, actually feels like. And so recently I just read this book called Madonna in a Fur Coat, and I think it does an incredible job talking about some of the themes that I've been grappling with in my own life. And it does an incredible job talking about imagination, the imagined sense of love, the fantasy of love versus the grounded experience of love. And I think this is a theme that's been moving through my life right now, and this book just really resonated, so I wanted to sit down and talk about it. So, Madonna in a Fur Coat is actually a Turkish modern literature, and it was written by Sabahattin Ali, published in 1943. Now, this book follows our main character, Rafe, who lives in Berlin around the 1920s, and while in Berlin, he meets a woman named Maria, who happens to be Madonna in a fur coat, and they end up sharing this tragic love story. Now, for me, the actual love story and the actual relationship between the characters didn't really stick out. If anything, it was a toxic relationship where Rafe, not pronouncing that right, Rafe is the anxiously attached and Maria is the avoidant, and they share this very toxic pull and push dynamic that can easily be seen as just romanticizing something that's very toxic. But for me, I really did not care about the relationship between the two characters. I cared more about how the author described love and how the author talks about the experience of love as a very grounded, tangible sort of experience. So yeah, before we dive into the topics of love in this book though, I kind of want to start off talking about Rafe, and the kind of lesson that Rafe learns earlier on in the book, because I think that this lesson is a cycle that all dreamers, poets, artists kind of experience in their life, and I think this cycle is something that's really important to understand, so I want to start there. So Rafe is a very introspective, very quiet, and I would say a very philosophical and artistic man. He says that I'm a person who lives more in my mind than in the world. My real life is nothing more than a tedious dream. Rafe is a dreamer. He lives inside the stories that he builds in his mind. He lives in his inner worlds more deeply and more strongly than he does in the external world. And I think a lot of us introverts or artists or creators feel this because we go out into the world to collect data, but then we come back in and we process that, and with whatever we've gathered, we build something inside of us. We build worlds and ideas and thoughts inside of us, and we love to live in that world because it's ours completely. At least I know I do. And I think that's where the story starts. It starts, this cycle that I'm talking about, it starts here. It starts in our imagination, in our inner world. We build such deeply complex and perfect scenarios, right? Perfect worlds, perfect characters, perfect situations, we build it inside our heads, because it's more fun for us to live in our inner perfect world than it is to go and step out. But eventually you do step out. Eventually, every kid has heard the phrase, follow your dreams. Eventually you have this urge to follow the dream, to take what's inside you, take this idea inside you and recreate it in the external world. So eventually every dreamer is moved to follow the dream, to create it, to move out and actually make that possibility, right? And this is the second step of the cycle, is this illusion that we have as naive children or young adults. We have this illusion that I can take this inner world and I can build it exactly in the external world. And we have this illusion that the external world should meet us. It should be there to reflect this inner world exactly as how we have pictured it. So the dreamer goes out. They go out to try to recreate this dream in the outer world. But that's when something interesting happens. You're met with the realization that it's not the job of the external world to give you the exact tones that your inner world gives you. It's impossible. The external world will never, ever reflect back to you in the same vivid, magical details that you have made in your inner world. The external world is not capable of that, and that's not its role. And that's the kind of universal betrayal that all artists feel, right? Riff says, I didn't even know what my imagined Europe was like, or what shortcomings this city had in comparison. I had not yet realized that nothing in life is ever as wonderful as we imagine it to be. Nothing in life is ever as wonderful as we imagine it to be. It's the universal betrayal that every single artist, poet, dreamer faces, is when we come to that stark realization that the external world is not going to give us what we feel in our inner world. It's not its job, it's not its role. And that's where pain, our first true pain comes from, because the only thing that you've ever wanted to do is follow your dreams, to recreate externally what you feel internally, and you're met with the stark realization that the external world is not built that way, that's not how life works. And it hurts. I think the first time you feel the universe's betrayal, it hurts. You feel like a child who's lost their innocence, a child who used to dream so freely, now is hesitant. You can become pessimistic for a little bit. Why dream if the world is never gonna give me as much as my inner world gives me, right? And you sit with that pain. I think you sit with that betrayal, and that's also part of the cycle, I think. But then I think something very interesting happens. There's an alchemy that takes place where the pain that's caused by the universe's betrayal kind of can be alchemized to create more depth in your life, to create more character in you, more depth, a stronger ability to connect to things, because now you are the experience of a dreamer. You're no longer the fantasy of a dreamer, you've lived it. And as an experienced dreamer, you are gifted this depth. And it's funny, Rafe says, after his first experience of this universal betrayal, where he goes to Europe and realizes it's not as he dreamed, after this hardship, he goes back to reading books, and he's saying, in almost all of them, I found fragments of myself, my surroundings, and what I had seen and heard, things I had lived among but never understood. I suddenly remembered believing I was now giving them their true meanings. Where after your first experience of this universal betrayal, you finally have the depth within you to look at music, to look at instruments, to look at media, to look at books, to look at the ocean, to look at a blank wall and see depth, because that depth lies within you now. And it's an experience, it's experienced within you. It's no longer just an idea, it's experienced within you. And then now you see the depth in the most simplest of things. And this is kind of the alchemy that every dreamer goes on. And that's where beauty lies. That's exactly where love lies. So this brings me to my second point, where we've learned what the cycle of the dreamer is, where you start off with a dream, you go out and you chase it in the external world, you're faced with the universal betrayal, and then you alchemize that pain into more depth and more love and more presence into your life. We've learned the cycle, and the funny thing is we've learned this cycle, and Rafe learns this cycle in the first 70-something pages of the book, right? If he's learned the lesson, why does he go on to make the mistakes that he does? Why does he go on to falling into the same trap, the same lesson when it comes to love, you know? But I think, again, a lesson as you understand it conceptually versus a lesson that you live and it becomes an experience are two very different things. And I think Rafe needed the experience because he understood the lesson intellectually, but he had to experience it. It had to become a felt experience in his life. So how does Rafe kind of approach love? He does it the same way that he approaches anything else. He starts in his inner world. He starts in his imagination, and he has this beautiful way of describing what he thinks love is. He creates this beautiful fantasy of what love should feel like. For him, love would be when a soul would emerge when it found its similarity, without even needing to consult our minds or calculations. Only then we would truly begin to live with our souls. Then all hesitations and shyness would be set aside, and souls would rush towards each other, trampling everything to embrace. He paints this beautiful picture, and to be honest, when I first read this, I fell for this fantasy as well, where, yes, okay, love is gonna be boring, but for us, spiritual people, for us, dreamers, for us, artists, we feel so deeply. Of course, for us, it'll be different, right? For us, love will be this magical, spiritual experience where, souls rush towards each other and nothing can come in the way. Surely for us, we're different. This fantasy will exist for us, right? Because even though we know the truth, sometimes believing in the fantasy just feels more fun. It's like a childlike hope where you're like, maybe, just maybe there's something better out there, just maybe this one time there's something better out there. And funny enough, Rafe feels this magical, beautiful way about love, and Maria also holds a fantasy about love, an imagined fantasy about love, but hers is a little bit, I would say, darker. While Rafe looks at love as this beautiful kind of fiction and fantasy in this beautiful story, for Maria, love is about finding something out there that can help with the darkness she feels inside. She's had a very difficult life. She lives with a lot of sorrow and pain. And for her, she believes, as much as she doesn't want to show it, deep down, she has this fantasy that love, my deepest, greatest love, he can come in and kind of take some of this pain away. And she says, this was the end. I wanted to try it this once. I thought perhaps this is what was missing. But no, that emptiness is still inside me, and it's grown even larger. Maria has this hope, this just once, maybe that fantasy is real, and maybe I can actually feel that sparkly love that everyone talks about. But she doesn't, right? She faces the universal betrayal, phase 2 of the cycle that we already know. That stark realization that that fantasy of love that we want does not exist out there. It's not. Even Rafe, her most perfect pair, he can't give her that fantasy because he's part of the external world. He's not part of her inner world, and as long as he's in her external world, he can never give her that fantasy because the external world is not here to meet our fantasies. It's here to, I don't know what it's exactly here for. But it's not here to give us this mystical, magical experience. That's what our inner world is for. The external world is more of a playground for us to experience things and then return back into our inner world and continue to build the magical worlds that we love, right? No, that was a little bit of a tangent, but that goes to say, Maria then faces that universal betrayal. She realizes that, okay, this man cannot fill the emptiness inside of me. She faces that betrayal and they separate. And they both sit with the pain of that betrayal, of the universal betrayal. The step 3 in the cycle that we know is you sit with that pain. You sit with knowing that the external walls will never give you what you want. And then the alchemy happens. And it's very funny because in this story, only one of the characters actually alchemizes the pain. Maria feels the pain of the universal betrayal, and she later alchemizes it and sees that love in the external world is very simple. It's very grounded. It's very boring. It's just showing up, and it's not gonna be this mystical, magical firework that heals this darkness inside of her. That's not what love is gonna be like. Love is gonna be someone just consistently showing up for her. It's very boring. It's not flashy at all, but that's what love is. And now she has the depth to understand that and to receive that, you know? And she says, but now I believe you've convinced me. I love you, not madly, but very rationally. Not madly. It's not, I'm madly in love. It's very rational. It's, you show up for me, and I love you, and that's it. That's all that love is. And with that, I think Maria gets satisfaction. I think she finishes the cycle. She has the fantasy, she has the betrayal, she has the alchemizing, and she has her acceptance. She realizes that love is just as simple as Rafe showing up for her, and I think she ends up having a very satisfying ending. Now, the second character, Rafe, I think he is not as lucky to have such a satisfying ending. For Rafe, I think he doesn't want to accept the universal betrayal. For him, the dream, the desire is so strong in his inner world, where he feels this magnetic love for Maria, which is mostly in his head. That dream is so rich and vivid for him that this time around he refuses to accept the universe's betrayal. He refuses to actually see reality for what it is, and instead he wants to hold on to the fantasy. And this kind of refusal to accept reality is what I think ends up causing him most suffering, and why he ends up living in so much pain, is because instead of acceptance, he wants to continue to live in the illusion of love, in the fantasy and imagination of love, than ever in the real world. He says, opportunities arose everywhere, and many people gave me brief hopes of expending the love I knew existed abundantly in my soul and beginning to live again. But I could never free myself from that doubt. It's funny because this quote shows how this is a choice for him. He's volunteering to stay in this pain because he knows that his soul can feel that love. He knows that love exists abundantly in my soul. He knows that he can feel that love again, that he is the source of that love, that his inner world is the source of that love. But this time, he doesn't want to accept that the external world will never give him that same satisfaction. He wants to continue to live in the illusion that Maria will give him everything that he's feeling inside. And there's beauty in that, in him believing so much in his inner world that he's willing to live in pain for it. There is a certain level of beauty. It's also really funny because it kind of shows, again, intellectually, he knows, intellectually he has the answers, intellectually he knows the source of love, but experiencing love and thinking about love are two different things, and he doesn't want to experience love in the external world because of how tedious it is, how boring it is. He wants to continue to live in the fantasy world because the love that he feels in the fantasy world is just deeper and richer. And so, because of that, he's willing to live an external life of suffering while a rich internal world, which is kind of exactly how he starts the story, right? He starts by saying, I live in my inner world. That's how he ends it too. He ends up living in his inner world. It's funny because his suffering kind of shows the people around him what not to do. It's a lesson in how if you refuse to accept the universal betrayal, the kind of pain that you live with, and I think it's a lesson on why alchemizing that pain is so important, and how returning and accepting that love is just boring is so important. Because at least for me, I want the boring, satisfying ending that Maria had, and not the suffering ending that Rafe has. I want to accept that love is boring. I want to accept that love is not fantasy and sparkles and fireworks. I want to accept that love is simple, and I want to alchemize it. And I want to live in the satisfaction of completing that cycle and not in the pain of refusing to accept the natural flow of life. And I think our narrator, he says something beautifully at the start of the book where he says, I understood why conversations was not necessarily essential for people to seek each other out, find each other, and observe each other's inner worlds, and why some poets constantly searched for someone who would walk beside them silently in the face of nature's beauty. The narrator does a beautiful job of describing boring, grounded, real love. It's just walking silently next to someone. It's not this sparkly soul tie that Rafe is chasing. It's simply sitting quietly next to one another, simply choosing each other every single day, and simply just being present with each other. Grounded love is boring. It's boring, but it's real. It's a real experience, and I'm learning I think that's what I want to choose. I want to choose to alchemize it, to alchemize the betrayal of that fantasy of love into the grounded experience of boring everyday love. And I find beauty in it now, I think, sitting with it long enough to find beauty in it. So yeah, those were my thoughts. I thought this was a really good read, and I would highly recommend it